I saw a video of a bear. It was somewhere in Yellowstone, and it was like a road. And for some reason, the park had these orange cones like in the road, and some of them had gotten knocked down. Well, the bear was going and picking up the cones and setting them upright.
Welcome to the Bookish Introverts Podcast. Join host Amazon bestselling author Brett Nelson and avid reader Melanie Dyer as they dive in to review books they've read, then chat with the amazing authors behind them. Quiet minds, big bookshelves. You don't want to miss it.
Hey everyone, it's Brett, and we are here continuing our summer author event with Baker Publishing Company. And for those of you who aren't familiar with them, they're one of Christian fiction's biggest publishing groups. So over the course of summer, we will speak with, I think it's like 23 different authors who write all sorts of genres, everything from romantic suspense, historical fiction, rom-coms. So there's a little bit of something for everything this summer, hopefully. So we got a full summer ahead of us. On today's podcast, we've got a romance suspense author with us. Her name is Suzanne Woods Fisher. We are so happy to have her here. So Suzanne, why don't you come in and tell everyone hi?
Well, hello to everybody, and I appreciate the time you've given. And I just want to make one point. This book that we're talking about is actually, there's a lot of suspense in it, but I'm not known for romantic suspense. I'm actually kind of known for
good to know.
Fiction or Amish fiction or historical fiction. But this is my first venture into kind of tipping into a story of suspense. And it's probably some of the authors you're going to interview who are like, white knuckling, gripping the page.
Yeah.
But hopefully this is the kind of a book that does like put you on your toes instead of your heels as you finish each chapter.
Yeah, for sure. That's always the hope when you write a book, that readers will just immerse in it, that they can't get out of the pages. So that's interesting. And I did read just a couple weeks ago. I read, and I'm blanking on the name. It was it was the first book in the Three Sisters Island.
Yes.
Yeah, I read that a couple of weeks ago. That was the first book of yours I read. And then I've got two books of yours in my Kindle that I haven't read yet. The ice cream ones. Yeah. So, yeah. So what made you, what, before we get into that, I want to do a short bio for anyone that may not have heard you, and then we'll kind of get into getting to know you and your book. So after college, you freelanced for a number of magazines, the Christian Parenting Today, Marriage Partnership, Today's Christian Women, Christian Retailing. So was, I guess, writing articles. Was that sort of your first foray into writing before you decided you wanted to branch out into novel writing?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think that was such a great foundation for me to write nonfiction articles and do the research and make cold calls and talk to experts. And I have 4 kids, so they were always grit for the oyster. There was just so much material. And it was kind of fun of young kids to be able to go and talk to people who are experts and then spin it into an article. That was so beneficial. But it was when my kids were leaving for college that I actually came to that point of thinking, okay, now what about a book? And I never thought of myself as a fiction author. I really had myself in that nonfiction world.
Yeah.
But I just kind of, something pushed me to try. And ever since, I have really tried to encourage writers not to box themselves up, because when I look back, I feel as if all my nonfiction writing has so enhanced my fiction writing with credible information and research. But I also feel like my fiction writing has now benefited my nonfiction because it's just jazzed it up and given it a little more color and flavor. And
yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you said that, because in the several writing conferences that I've been to, I'm an author too. I just published my 7th book. And so I've been to several writing conferences. And one thing they like to tell you, they like to pound it in your head, is find your lane and stay in it. So you just said, don't box yourself in. So, and I have a hard time staying in my lane. So, y'all, like I've got a series of books that are spiritual warfare fiction books. My third book to that will be out probably next year, and so I've got one that's sort of a Christmas book that deals with. I kind of flipped the script on eating disorders, and I made the main character a man dealing with an eating disorder. So I don't stay in one lane very well. So do you think as writers, that's okay to sort of, or do you think you need to pick a niche and stay in it?
Oh, I sort of feel that most writers are overblessed with an abundance of curiosity. If you're a good writer, it's because you are interested in so many things. So I will say writing is a business. When you're trying to write a publication, the market is going to determine a lot of what is successful for you if you're looking at traditional publishing in a large scale. And so you have to keep that in mind, because just because you're interested in a topic, it may not be interesting to the market.
To the market.
But,
yeah.
Yeah. But as a writer, I just think I hope every book is better than the one before it till the day I die. I just want to keep working on my craft and stretching. And I really encourage writers to not necessarily stay in a lane, I think it only enhances your writing skills.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Now, do you, as a traditionally published author that works directly with a publishing company, are you kind of forced to write to the trends, so to speak?
Let's not use the word forced. Let's say the door opens with the trend.
Okay.
And like I said, they are in this business to be profitable. And
absolutely. Yeah. Nobody profits by a book that nobody wants to read, the author or the publishing group.
Well said.
Yeah.
And some books are meant for a lot of people and some books are meant for a smaller audience. It doesn't mean there aren't wonderful books still to be written that might have a really narrow audience. And yet, I think to be wise, you do sort of have to be savvy about what's coming, I have appreciated Revell. I'm kind of in a unique situation where I've had the same publishing house for all my books, same editors. And my editors are so savvy about the market. They're not just savvy about writing well. Yeah. So I listen carefully. I love the editing process. I listen. I pitch tons of ideas to my editors that get shot down, and that's okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, interesting. And I've often wondered how, that's a very nice thing to have, to where to people that you're working alongside that can kind of guide you in, okay, this is what people, this is what's popular right now. If you can focus on, something on this path, so to speak, rather than trying to figure it all yourself. So that would definitely complicate the process a lot more. So that's nice to have.
Yeah. I feel very thankful, very appreciative of these individuals that I work with whom I work.
Yeah, they really immerse themselves in the industry to help their authors flourish and do well. Yeah. And they're the unsung heroes for sure. So you lived in Hong Kong for a little while, and I do want to go back to that in a little bit. You got your first agent with Heartline Literary Agency through a connection through people. I'm going to have to put my glasses on. I'm at that age where I have to wear glasses when I read. You got your first agent through Heartline Literary Agency through a connection to the Plain people through your grandfather, who was raised plain, which opened up a conversation with Revell Publishing, which is under the umbrella of Baker Publishing. So I've never heard of the term plain people. Is that another word for Amish people?
It's a word that the Anabaptists use for themselves. That's how they would talk about themselves to each other. So,
okay.
And Anabaptists, I'm talking about really an arm of the Protestant church, essentially, that began with the Mennonites and include the Hutterites and the German Baptists, which my grandfather was and relatives are, as well as Old River Brethren Apostolic. It goes on and on. It ends, the last to the party were the Old Order Amish. So they're the ones we know best, but they were really the last one. And it's essentially, just to give a really brief history lesson, it was in the early 1500s, after the Reformation, when a group started by Menno Simons, who was a priest at the time, actually believes strongly in adult baptism, that there's a moment of decision. And that seems to us like such a minor thing in our day and age. But at that time, that was civil anarchy. And thus began a lot of persecution from inside the church, from the government, because when you think about it, this is, follow the money. This was how the church and the government kept track of taxes and records. And these Anabaptists were chased across Europe, their land confiscated, and yet they grew and grew and grew. So now when we have the Old Order Amish coming to the United States in the late 1800s, the great sweep of immigration, they came little by little through the 1800s, 1700s, 1800s, but towards the end of the 1800s, sociologists really assumed they would assimilate into the culture like other social groups had. And here they are today, the fastest growing population in North America.
Wow.
Not the largest, but the fastest growing.
The fastest.
And it's all inside out, very few converts, because it really is a very different lifestyle. It's a different language. It's a different way of thinking. But they hold fast to these traditions, 400 years later, in this wild world of technology. They're just holding firm, and I just find them absolutely fascinating. So
I have never heard that. So how do they differ from Amish? Do they live as simple of a life as the Amish? Or when I saw that I've never seen any of your Amish books, so I didn't realize when I was looking at all of your books. So when I saw your Amish books, I was like, oh, I bet that's kind of another name for Amish. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your question? Do they?
So are they? Do they live like an Amish type life, like a simple life, kind of like the Amish, or?
You mean my grandfather or the
plain you said the plain people? Yeah.
Yeah, the plain people. I would say the Old Order Amish, in particular, would live the most distinctive life. The one that feels horse and buggy, or electricity into the house. They're not part of the public utility grid. They're very self-sufficient. But even within the Old Order Amish, you have from super ultra conservative to really progressive. I mean, even there's a wide spectrum. They're not one size fits all. Every church is self-standing. They have their own bishop and ministers and deacon. So there's a lot of variation. And I think what's fun about the plain people, and I'm using that term now, I would say then there's larger groups outside of the Old Order Amish who you wouldn't even necessarily know they were plain. Other than the church they go to. But high education, the Mennonites have quite a few graduate level, colleges and universities and seminaries. They're missionaries all around the world. You've got the German Baptists, like my relatives, who dress plain. They have the garb, the prayer cap, the long clothing. The men have the horseshoe beards. But my relatives will use electricity. They will use cars. They will fly in an airplane, but they don't have a computer or a radio in their home or a television. And that's what I was exposed to even as a child, of just seeing a lifestyle that, well, it has such a there's a beauty in it, in the simplicity of it. And then I think I also saw their faith. My phrase of it is, it's the pie crust. It's not a piece of the pie. It defines everything for them. And that's what I like to also bring out in my work, that faith is believing in a sovereign God is just really their cardinal value.
Yeah. That is so interesting. Are they centralized to any particular location in the United States, or are they just kind of scattered all over?
So good question. The Old Order Amish are generally, their largest populations are Pennsylvania, Dutch.
Yeah, that's what I visualize when I think of Pennsylvania.
Yes, Lancaster County is one of the top First Nations in the country. All the way Ohio and Indiana would be the largest hubs, if you want to call it that, the farmland. But farmland's gotten expensive, and they're getting crowded out, and they're starting, and they have moved to many states, ones you would never even expect, Maine and Vermont and Montana and Colorado. They're not in California. There's a lot of Mennonites in California and German Baptists, but not the old order Amish. But they are, and anywhere they go. I mean, I was in Belize, and the Mennonites have ended up, old order Mennonites have ended up in Belize, sort of a circuitous route, I think from Russia, persecuted, to Canada. Then things got probably heavy taxation, and then down in Mexico, and then finally they ended up in Belize. And they have ended up changing the economy of Belize. They have supported it with, dairy, and anywhere you go is Mennonite cheese in Belize, and their farms, you would think you're in Lancaster County. And it's just really amazing what these people do with their hard work, their work ethic, their simplicity of living, so that funds aren't wasted. They back in. Anyway, I'm giving you a long lecture you probably hadn't expected. But
no, it's so interesting. Well, and I'm a guy that likes modern conveniences. I like modern technology, but there's a part of me, the simple lifestyle like that, there's a certain appeal to it sometimes. It seems like such a nice way of life.
Well, and I would say that is what I really aim for I've written nonfiction books about the old order Amish as well as fiction. But I really love the idea that you don't have to go Amish, but there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn about living with less, living within your means, being a little more intentional before you go forward with things, just because everyone's doing it. And when you think of how social media has pervaded our life, and I just think, I feel for parents at this day and age trying to keep the genie in the bottle.
Yes.
And the Amish are really teach us how to be slow to embrace, to be thoughtful and careful, and it's okay to say no. Not all the glitters is gold,
Exactly. Well, and I think that's the lesson in it. It's okay to slow down. Yeah. We live in such a rapid world, and people just, they go, and it's okay to slow down and just enjoy life, and that's so interesting. So I'm glad we kind of got to talk about that. So you've written over 30 books, historical fiction, romance, children's, and Amish. And you've several of your books have been awarded and on several bestseller lists. I was going to went on your website and but you've got so many of them, I couldn't even read them all. It would take 10 minutes. But your book, A Healing Touch, was a Parable bestseller. Lost and Found was an ECPA fiction bestseller in 2023 and 2024. The Secret to Happiness was a CELA 2024 finalist. The Sweet Life was a CELA 2023 finalist, and it just kind of goes on and on and on. So, and one of my books is up for a CELA this year. So that's my first time. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting. That's the first time one of my books has been up for something like that. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, exciting. So how did you go to the banquet for the CELA awards? When yours?
I did it because that's back east and I am in California, and it is not easy to get back and forth. A couple times a year, but it is not easy to do it. But I would love to go to the Blue Ridge Christian Writers Conference someday. It's a terrific conference.
It's a terrific group. It really is. So I saw on your website that you created nonfiction presentations that complement your novels. I would love to hear a little bit about that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So, and this goes back to kind of my nonfiction time as a writer, which was really most of my writing, really my 20s, 30s, and 40s was the nonfiction. So what I've always been looking to find new readers and to reach people in a different way. And so one of the ways that has been really effective for me, and I love doing it, is so much of the material I do as I'm preparing for a book and then ends up on the cutting floor, because it can be a little too textbooky. It can be a little too many facts, on and on. But I've been able to take that information and then create really fun library presentations. I will offer to, as a virtual author, visit to libraries. Love doing it because I'm such a fan of libraries, and I have been in some of the really underserved parts of our country, which there are many, And that library is the only game in town. That is providing internet. It is providing that help with the digital divide with seniors and technology. It is the tutoring spot for kids, on and on and on, community centers. So any way I can to support libraries, I do. So this I do free of charge. But I've created, for example, I wrote a book called Moonlight School, and it is based on a true story about a woman in Kentucky in the 1900s who had this idea. She was a superintendent of her county, very poor county, very high adult illiteracy rate, like 30%. And she had this idea of opening up her little one-room schoolhouses on moonlit nights and having her teachers stay. And she created kind of a basic curriculum to just move adults into functional literacy. And she had 52 classrooms. Remember, this is a true story. She hoped that maybe 100 would come. And on the very first night, September 5th, 1911, 1,200 people filled schoolhouses. And in 2 years...
Isn't that fantastic?
It's the best story.
Yeah.
It's just, I just am so amazed with what she did. In 2 years. She wiped out adult illiteracy in her county.
Wow.
And it's just, and that essentially is kind of what night school is today. That's where it began, the whole idea of teaching adults at night. And of course, moonlights, they needed the great big moon to help them travel, because these were hills and hollows and caverns and, and these were subsistence farmers. They were just scratching a living. And she knew these people well. She was able to create materials that did not humiliate them. They weren't reading the McGuffey primers. They were reading reports about farming and prices and crops and weather, things that related. So she brought them to a functional literacy. It's just a brilliant story. Anyway, I created a whole thing about her life, not so much about I did one part of the presentation was about how do I create a story out of those basic facts? Like, how do I fan it out? And I brought in the music and the food and all the things that enhance that time of life in Kentucky and that, that point. But just that kind of, a lot of it was about adult illiteracy, where we were in 1911, where we are today, the causes for it. Anyway, you get the idea.
Yeah.
How to use that excess material and bring it into a presentation that could be really using your beneficial for you, but also so beneficial for an audience.
For everyone else. Yeah. Okay. Well, when I saw that, I was like, that I wasn't exactly sure what that was. So that's a very creative way to use all of your research and stuff that you've dug up along the way. Yeah.
And I just did the PowerPoint. I have someone help me put it together. So it's really a fun, pleasant, polished thing. And
so this is something you do like when you're doing an online event with someone, or actually even in person, or is this something that they can just log in and do?
Well, I have done it in person, but it is actually like library events. So they'll host an event. I mean, I did one about ice cream, about the history of ice cream, and that is a fun one. And a lot of libraries did ice cream socials after.
Fun. So,
so they kind of get in on the fun. I've done one on the Audubon Society and the Christmas bird count that fit in with a book that I wrote about the Amish and the birds, because they're big birders. And I'm working on one now. So about this book, Capture the Moment, that's coming out this summer, and it's about national parks. It's the first in my series about the national parks.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that. We're going to talk about that here in a few minutes. One thing I do want to ask you about is I'm always when I talk to authors, I'm always so interested to hear their journey into becoming an author. So can you kind of walk us through a little bit of how you became, we've kind of already hit on it. You kind of started in magazines, and then you just did that kind of become to the point where you're like, okay, I want to try something a little bit more complex, and then moved into novels. Like, can you kind of give us a little idea of how that transpired?
Well, we mentioned that I've been living in Hong Kong. So we were there for 4 years, and it was right as the internet was taking off, and I was still able to write articles, which was really fun. And then as we moved back, we repatriated. And it was a time of life that was a little bit of a transition point for me. It was like my dad was starting to show signs of Alzheimer's and my kids were leaving for college. And writing, it just felt kind of like it became very, I wasn't quite sure how much I wanted to share anymore personally. Like it was just a little bit of one of those times in life. And my niece she was in college and she sent me a book called If You Want to Write. And this is by Brenda Ullin, 1936, I think it was. Classic book. Really, really valuable for writers. And it had a phrase in it, and I should memorize it, but but the essence of it was, everyone has something interesting to say. That was kind of the essence of it. And I started thinking, what is stopping me from writing? And because I love to write so much. And I decided it was just me. It was just me assuming I couldn't. It was too much. I had this idea of a little World War II novel. I just started, and I actually didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my kids. I didn't tell my husband. I didn't tell my sister. I literally wrote and wrote and wrote, and just thought, and I do think that first book is kind of a sweet time of life because it's just a journey you're taking yourself, and you don't need anybody's opinion about it. People, they mean well, but they can be so discouraging, and reviews really hobble you. And
they can.
Really bad. And so I at the end of it, I had kind of that first draft, and the first draft's a drafty draft. It needs a lot of work. But I told my family that night at dinner that I had written a book, and my son, who, how sensitive boys are, he said, "That's why there's no food in this house." And he was spot on, because for about 3 or 4 months, I really, I'm not a big shopper, but even our Visa was really low. But with that, though, and this is my word for writers who are aspiring to get published, even with all the connections I had, I really got a ton of rejections, a ton of them.
Did you?
Yeah. And I think this is one of the things that you have to realize. This is a tough business. No one is looking for you. They're really looking for why you shouldn't be published. That is the goal of a acquisitions editor. You almost have to climb that hill to convince them that it's worth publishing you. And finally, I did get a offer from a small royalty publishing house. So it wasn't self-published, but it was small royalty. And I just decided to go ahead and think, well, one book, let me just try. It's another thing I kind of encourage to aspiring authors is the idea that, to start small. Small beginnings are good things. For me, it's so good because I kind of learned how to talk to a bookstore about commission sales, how to make presentations, how to go to book clubs in my neighborhood and, around the area, how to just kind of get exposed. Because once the book is out there, you're kind of in front of the world in your underwear. You really do have to sort of be ready and be a little bit on the thick skin side for all this. Well, that book ended up getting some awards. Again, a little bit easier in a small pond. And that caught the eye of an agent who caught the eye of an editor, and on and on. The door opened for me with writing about the older Amish, and I'm thankful for it. And I feel genuinely they've changed me, getting to know the Amish the way I have. So it's been a great journey.
Oh, good. That's so exciting. And I can really, when I wrote I wrote 4 books before I ever told anyone I had written a novel.
Wow.
And I didn't even start publishing my books until after I had written the 4th one. So I did my first one. I just wanted to see if I could do it. And then I did. It was a 500-page tome. And so I always think it's real interesting to see how, because writing a book for the first time, a novel for the first time, it's a very daunting task to take on. So, yeah.
Oh, when I think of magazine articles were usually 2,500 words max, and now it's 85,000 words. That is overwhelming. Even now, every time I open a brand new Word document and start chapter 1, it's like, wow, is there going to be a book here?
Yeah, exactly. Do you ever worry that you can't do it again? Like once you write one, or have you written enough that you're like pretty secure that you can keep doing it?
I probably feel less and less anxious about can I deliver the goods. And it is more of understanding, getting comfortable with points that are like every day I hit a word count, and yet not every day is billable. Like it doesn't mean it's great, but it advances the plot to some degree and keeps my head in the book.
Yeah.
And feel kind of a little bit of a piece that it's going to come together. I'm going to see the weak spots. I'm going to be able to fill in, and kind of like almost comfortable with that editing process that even on my side of it, that's going to come.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's kind of how I do it too. Like when I'm writing, I kind of just get it down. I don't worry so much about is it pretty, and then I sort of pretty it up through self-editing before it goes to beta readers and eventually the professional editor. So yeah. So of course, as you know, writing novels is a process that authors learn and really improve in over time. I always tell people, if you read an author's first book and you don't like it, give them another shot, because they're going to get better. The more you do it, the better you get. So if you could boil down your writing career to just like maybe a lesson or two that you've learned over time, what would that be?
I think the best advice that I came across, I kind of fashioned it out of an article in the newspaper, and I really encourage all writers to keep this in mind. And I read a story about a woman who had turned 100 years old, and they asked her, what is it that has helped you live this long? And this woman said, I want to know what happens next. Yeah. And I just thought that boils down how a reader should feel as they open the first page. And yes. They don't, what happens next? What happens next? And it's so hard to do, like to end a chapter where the reader is on their toes and not their heels. That's not easy. When you see an author do that, that is, give them the props, because really pushing people to want to know, I can't put it down yet. I can't figure it out yet.
Yes. And as a reader, those are the best kind of books to read, because not everyone can do that, Yeah. But again, I think it's a learned skill. I think you can learn to do that. Sometimes it takes time. And of course, good editors can help you with that too. So they're another unsung hero in the publishing industry, a good editor. Okay. So let's go into the book now. The book is called Capture the Moment. And I do want to say, first off, the book cover is amazing. I am a huge book cover snob. And the first time I saw this book, I was like, oh, love it. So for those, hold that up again for a second. So for the readers that are listening instead of watching, it's a cover. It's got a woman on it. She's got a camera up to her face, and it's sort of facing the audience. And in the lens of the camera is like a landscape. So it's just a beautiful book cover. So your cover designer,
she did a fabulous job, but I want you to look even closer. Do you see what's in the lens?
Well, I see mountains and a red sky. Am I missing something?
Do you see something brown?
You know what? I've got a picture of it here. Okay, there's an animal there.
Grizzly bear.
Okay, and then I've got a black and white cover, so there's a grizzly bear, and that grizzly bear plays an integral part of the story.
Big part of the story.
Yeah. So why don't you give us just a little brief synopsis of the book? And I don't know about you as an author, one of the most difficult things for me to do is to synopsize a book. So isn't that hard? Do you think that's hard?
It's so hard. Back cover copy is so hard, or an elevator pitch is so hard.
It is. Yeah. So give us just a little brief, tell us a little bit about what that book out, and then we'll kind of break it down a little.
Okay. Well, this is a story about a young woman named Kate Cunningham, and she is a photographer in a zoo. Mm-hmm. And Kate has grown up in a New England home, or actually East Coast home, that is super traditional, super academic, kind of the type of house where the wallpaper doesn't change. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she just doesn't fit. She has dyslexia. School was really challenging for her, but photography, the visual, understanding animal behavior, that is really working for her well. And she is one day photographing bears at the zoo, and a National Geographic editor comes along and says, you know what? There is this iconic bear. This is true in Grand Teton National Park, number 399, grizzly bear. And if you can get a unique photograph of that overly photographed bear, I will take a look at it. And Kate, thinking, okay, this is it. This is my shot. She just heads through the wilderness thinking
she took that as a challenge.
She just thought, I can do this. This is my break. And what's fun is that she's naive in many ways about the wilderness, about the fact that there are probably 40 professional photographers are also trying to get pictures of this bear as she emerges from hibernation.
She's got competition.
Yeah. And she also, one thing also that's happening is that there is a poacher in the park. And so every chapter I have an interlude in between Kate's story, and it's from the poacher's point of view. And now poaching, I'm just to be clear, is different from hunting. Poaching is really illegal trading, and that's what this guy's after, but he is a super skilled, super clever poacher. So essentially, they're both trying to get shots of 399. This bear, true story, this bear has captured the imagination of wildlife enthusiasts everywhere. She is known for her motherhood, and she's one of the oldest reproducing bears that is known. She's tagged number 399. That's why she's got that lovely label. And not because of any other reason than that. And she has had, I think, 22 cubs. And older. She's been older having these cubs, which is really remarkable. But one thing she learned, in fact, she even emerged a few years ago with quadruplets, which is a really big deal. You nurse them when you're a geriatric mother, feed them, protect them, teach them the ways of the wild, keep them safe. Because male grizzlies are always wanting to kill the cubs so they can mate with the female and get back to business. So 399 learned to stay closer to people, and not too close, but she will come down and get near the roads and stay away from where the male grizzlies are. And because of that, she's been photographed quite a lot. She's been observed a lot. And people have been enamored with her. For example, she teaches her cubs to look left and right before they cross the road.
How funny. Oh my gosh. That reminds me I don't know if you ever saw the video back during the pandemic, when the world was closed down, Yellowstone was closed down. I saw a video of a bear. It was somewhere in Yellowstone, and it was like a road. And for some reason, the park had these orange cones like in the road, and some of them had gotten knocked down. Well, the bear was going and picking up the cones and setting them upright. So of course, the people, when they noticed what was going on, they were like, oh my gosh, so they wanted to catch it on camera. So they went back out there and laid them all back down, and they caught the picture of this bear, and she went down and every one of them was setting them. That's hilarious. These animals are intelligent. Yeah. So when you said that popped that story in my mind.
I think that being able to observe 399 the way they have been able to. Now, I'm talking, I don't mean to sound careless like people are petting her. This is an 800-pound predator.
Yeah, it's not a pet. Yeah.
No, and it's not like people were close to her. But there has been a lot that people have understood in that there is more sensitivity. There's more. I mean, for example, one of her cubs was killed by a car, Snowy. He had sort of a white face, and she was observed weeping and crying, moaning and crying over his body. I mean, there's just things that I think have captivated people's attention and probably, personified human feelings in a bear. And I don't mean to sound silly about that, but learned a lot. There's far more complex emotions and intelligence, and also I think teaching people how to live with the wild, how to observe and respect, but also let them be wild. So 399 is just a rock star. And there's even there's a PBS documentary on her, Queen of the Tetons. And anyway,
I need to pull that up and watch it.
Yeah, really special. So all that said, Kate is trying to get a picture of this bear. The poacher is trying to get a shot of this bear. And happily, there is a ranger who has taken a little bit of pity on Kate just because she is so mocked by the other photographers. She has missed a couple things, like in a zoo, the animals become super conditioned to human noise and not so in the wild. So like one moment her cell phone goes off. She just forgot to turn it off. Or another time when, just little things that the animals in the zoo eat and sleep in sort of a rhythm. They're fed and they've developed a synchronicity. Not true in the wild. Things like that. And the other photographers call her Zoo Girl, sort of push her out. And this one guy he's a biology teacher during the year. Summer, he's a seasonal ranger in charge of some bear management. Kind of just feels sorry for her. He's one of those guys who prefers bears to people, but he is going to try to help her out. I don't mean to make that sound like an easy love story, because they both have relationships that are part of the story. So you don't really know how things are going to roll out here. And there's a lot of twists and turns. And it's a really fun story, and you learn a lot about bears.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of animal lovers out there. There's a lot of people that will pick up a book just because it has an animal in it. So, so if you're an animal lover, this might be a good book to pick up, if for no reason other than that. So this is. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say that again.
Well, that and national parks, because I think the Grand Teton National Park is really almost one of the main characters, because it is just a beautiful park, and I kind of hope people will end up wanting to just put it on their bucket list if they haven't been to it yet.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Now, this is the first book in the series. How many books will be in the series? Do you know yet?
Contracted, yeah. And so I have the second one's already into the editor, and that one is set in Acadia National Park.
Oh,
very different. That's Maine, and here we've got the ocean, we've got a shipwreck, we've got the treasure that's been kind of stolen and is turning up in the park. So anyway, it's very
fun. So that'll probably be 2026, you think?
That'll come out next May. It's not titled yet. And then the third one, I'm still working out with my editor which national park. She has one idea and I have another, so stay tuned.
Oh, we'll see who wins.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a trilogy, or is it possible that it might even go beyond that?
Oh, I would love that, because I just think the national parks are endless. They're just, and I think one of the things that is so special about the national parks right now is that in our divided, polarized country, it is one thing that makes Americans. We are so proud of those parks, of what they were and are to be, and the people that have preserved it. And I kind of feel like they're an antidote to a lot of what ails our country.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you can just go and be in nature and just forget everything else. And a lot of people need to do that, I think.
Yeah, that, and just remember our country is a good place to be.
It is a great place to be. Yeah. So, and that's one good thing about being an author. You kind of get to go places and do things to sort of prepare for writing your book. What was I'm assuming you probably went to the Tetons, and tell us a little bit about what things you got to do in order to write the book.
Well, the Teton is sort of an interesting place because it is a valley floor and then just these steep granite mountains. So there's no foothills. So the valley floor is fascinating. You've got Jackson, the town, which is super cool. There's the only airport in a national park is in Grand Teton National Park. That's just historically the way it was folded in. You've got this elk reserve where just an enormous amount of elks come down for the winter. You've got lots of beautiful lakes and hikes, and Snake River winding through, and Jackson Dam and Jackson Lake, and beautiful lodges like Jenny Lake or Jackson Lake with a lot of history. But then I think there's also something interesting, which is just let's go way back. And every park you go to has this old history, and it's so important that we learn about and understand that as well. So the indigenous people that were there's some beautiful stories that come out of that. Then there was the trapper period where they would have rendezvous in that area. Jackson Hole Valley, that's what it means. Later, let's move to the time when there was a Mormon settlement that came in and tried to survive the winters there. And the Mormon barn is probably one of the most photographed barns in America. I think most everyone would recognize it. They lasted a few years, and the Mormon settlement is still there, but they couldn't really make it work. Those winters are a tiny bit chilly.
They're brutal.
Yeah. Well, I got a little bit of everything, and that's what I loved about the Grand Teton National Park is you really see these layer upon layer of human history and where things are now, and then who knows how, whether it'll keep expanding. I hope so. But it's a beautiful, beautiful park, close to Yellowstone.
Oh, is it close to Yellowstone? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you can go to Yellowstone easily from there.
But it's not part of the Yellowstone. Those are two separate entities. Parks. Yeah, two separate parks. Yeah. Okay. Now, for the book in Acadia, have you been to those parks? Yeah.
Yes, went to Acadia National Park. Got up at 4 a.m. to go see the sunrise on Cadillac Mountain.
Oh,
Cadillac, which is the Cadillac that we know, that was the explorer, the French explorer that ended up in Detroit. And it's the first. For most of the year, it's the first part of the sun hitting the East Coast is if you go to the top of Cadillac Mountain, which is not a high mountain by any means, but it was kind of fascinating to be there because you're looking out on the ocean and behind you is utter darkness. And in front of you, you just start to see how light changes the horizon and fills the sky. And then once the sun is up, it's like a rock concert let out. Everyone leaves.
Really? Well, I bet it's amazing. I've never been, so I need to put that on my bucket list for sure.
That would be worth it. Bar Harbor is a great town. It's definitely.
Now, is it the kind of thing where when you go, you have to throw up a tent, or like, are there hotels and stuff around?
At the Acadia? Oh, lots of options. Just whatever level of camping or high-end luxury.
Oh,
because
okay.
It is a coast and an island, and so there's huge, the giant tourist boats. What do you call them? The cruise ships come in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They, so you've got a little bit of everything. A lobster boat next to a cruise ship and things like that.
Yeah, you get to see a lot of people and a lot of things, and
And I actually think that's what's fun about Acadia is that it's so accessible. It's not hard to get to. It's got a little bit of something for everybody. And that's really fun versus, say, a more remote national park that is hard to get to, like the one up in Michigan, Isle. I'm forgetting the name.
Yeah. Well, and when I think of a national park like that, that's kind of where my mind goes to throwing up a camp and, and I'm like throwing up a tent and roughing it. And I'm kind of not a roughing it kind of guy. I need some sort of I need electricity and running water.
Well, I think a lot of the national parks have their history in the railroad times when the railroads were building these beautiful lodges for people to come and see, just to get people on the trains. And so you can go to some of these gorgeous hotels. If you need a good hotel, there's something for you.
There's something there. All right. Good to know. I'm going to do that. So let's go to Kate in your book. One of the sort of one of the arcs of the book is her journey to finding her purpose. So can you kind of tell us a little bit, take us a little bit into that?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, she'd had dyslexia. School was hard. She's found her place that she feels really happy and settled. And I think all of a sudden she's back as a fish out of water and trying to figure this out. And she just keeps trying, which is so impressive. This is, I think, part of her. And it's actually part of, I think, people who do have a little bit of learning disabilities. They see the world in a little different way, and they keep going and going and going. And I think there's a gift in that struggle. And she has a boyfriend who's a big part of the story, and he is ever present. And he's the one who's calling her, and the phone goes off, when she's trying she's trying to figure that out too, and how this relationship has maybe caused her to be held back in a lot of ways, because it's a little bit of the same kind of story that she grew up in, where somebody's telling her how to think and what to be and what to wear. And
yes,
she's just trying to really make this make this work
and forge her own path a little bit.
Yeah, and not depend on someone else, or not just accept someone else's idea of what her life should be.
Well, and it's a very hard thing in life, whether you're a fictional character or whether you're flesh and blood human. It's a very hard thing in life to, because it's to go from photographing bears behind a fence to wildlife. I mean, that takes a lot of courage to do something like that. So it shows sort of an inner strength in her too, I think.
I agree. And all by herself, her boyfriend wanted to come with her. He was really eager to be with her. And she just thought, it's going to be his. He's going to tell me how to do it, where to get it, and she really had to pushing back at this is mine. This is my thing right now. So even the ranger who helps her is not, I always like to have a book where a woman comes into her own and maybe a wonderful guy is part of the story, but he's not. He's not the one fixing everything for her, because that's life. That is, even in a wonderful marriage, you have to figure out who you are on your own. You can't just have this one person be everything. So,
yes. Yeah. And that's hard no matter what it is, finding yourself. So sometimes, So I love that. For the poaching aspect of it, that's such a heartbreaking scenario, because you've got these people out there that are slaughtering animals just to have something to hang on their mantle, so to speak. So what was it about how did you settle on poaching as a potential book topic?
Because of 399, because there have been threats to her life by poachers.
So her story was the impetus for that. Yeah.
Yes. And, there was a period years ago where there was someone, I think the grizzly bears have been an endangered species, and then they were protected, and then they were coming up. And I do appreciate, I want to be clear that I understand ranchers have a different point of view about how many, livestock and protecting them from the flock, and I do understand about hunters and all that. I do. I'm not trying to make this a statement. Yes. But there was a point when Wyoming, I think, and Montana were really pushing to change the status of the grizzly bear from no longer endangered, so that there could be a quantity of them could be hunted. And the women, a huge amount of women in Jackson, kind of came up with this shoot them with a camera concept. Yeah. And there was even going to be a lottery for how many people could get a hunting license, not for just 399, but just for bears. And they just flooded the lottery so that they could just crowd out the hunters. Yeah. I think that's kind of a fun story of how to get around things and work with it. And it ended up where I think they did not change the status of the bear. But I had heard about this one poacher who wanted 399 for a living room rug. And I think that was the feeling of like outrage and indignation, because these poachers, they're really doing it for greed. They're a lot of the poachers that are after certain animals are taking just certain organs and then they're selling them overseas as aphrodisiacs. And so the carcass is left, and just such a greedy around the world is a terrible story of how just disrespectful people are of these beautiful creatures. Yeah. Again, very different from hunting for your family. I don't mean to. Yes. Yeah.
We're not trying to make a political statement here. It's just we're just having a conversation. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't send us letters.
Exactly. Yeah. We don't need any hate.
Yeah.
So was there anything as you were writing the book, of course, when you were doing your research or just in the writing process, was there anything that sort of popped out as something unexpected that you learned that you didn't know, or just, did anything sort of pop out to you as, interesting?
I think I interviewed rangers, and that was really interesting to hear their point of view about being a ranger in a very busy summer season in particular. Mm-hmm. In fact, one bit of advice to anybody going to a national park is try to not go during the summer if you can, because not only is it the busiest season, but it's also the construction season. Most of the parks, not the ones in the south, of course, but anything north, they've only got a few months to get those roads fixed and repaired and on and on. So you're just dealing with crowds and delays and construction sites and on and on. So that was one thing that was interesting, learning about just what rangers do, how many people are part of the program. And it's all for the tourists. It's all really to educate, they're there to make your experience really good. They're not there to scold you. They want to keep the animals safe. They're very protective of the animals. I mean, there's bear sightings, and boy, there are rangers all over to just keep people at a distance.
Are
But
they?
they're not.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But not
Yeah.
discouraging people either. They want you to enjoy and
Yeah.
have this, wonderful experience in their park because they love it too.
Yeah, well, yeah, and they would almost have to be out there because sometimes I think people forget wild animals aren't domesticated pets. So yeah.
Well, one thing kind of, rangers are not to make fun of the tourists.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how they don't to each other, because every year there's people. I mean, even the bears, I think there's 30 to 40 bears are not out necessarily to attack you, but they don't like to get surprised, and they don't like you coming between them and their babies, and they're very hungry. But people feed them, or they don't realize what they're doing. And there's 30 to 40 attacks a year from bears. North America.
And you're kind of in their territory when you're there. So even though it's a national park for us, you're in their home, so to speak. So yeah.
Yeah. In fact, when you mentioned, is Yellowstone separate from Grand Tetons, I thought, I almost said this, but I didn't. They are, but the animals don't know there's a boundary. So
yeah. To them, it's just all the same. Yeah. So have you got any, I'm sure it's really exciting for these rangers to have somebody putting a book out there that sort of deals with their line of work. Have you gotten any feedback from anyone? Like, what kind of feedback are you getting about including that in a book?
Too soon to tell. The book hasn't released yet, and so I haven't heard, but I did send copies to all the rangers I spoke to.
Okay, see, that's what I was wondering, if you had, if they had maybe beta read or anything like that. So yeah.
No, I didn't do that, but because I really was using them as sort of like a touch point, like just hearing about their experience and their thoughts, and not so much using them as a source of actual material.
Yeah. So is there anything else about the book that you want to kind of point out or talk about that I haven't brought up?
No, I think we've covered a lot of good parts about just the love of national parks, and people should get to these parks, and they're growing. There's already 63 of them, and they're almost in everybody's backyard somewhere, and they have just so much to offer. So I mean, even where I live is close to John Muir's house, where that's a federal site, not a park, but it's just, there's so many, I think over 400 of those sites around the country.
Yeah.
And
and it can be as inexpensive or as expensive as a vacation as you need it to be. So it's a very accessible way to unwind a little bit.
It is.
Yeah. Are there any that you haven't been to that's sort of a bucket list for you?
Well, let's see. I haven't been. I'd like to go to the Great Smokies. I'd like to go to Glacier. Really want to go to Glacier. I hear that is one of those that is a wow. The Pinnacles is in California, and I'd like to get to that because that's where the condors were again an endangered species, and they were released, the California condors, and you can see them flying. There's dark sky parks. I don't know if you've ever heard of those, but they are where rangers will take you out on star walks and for stargazing, and they are far removed. They're supposed to be. There's a lot of them. I've been to one of them, and there's, literally you don't even have a flashlight. Your phone is put away. You are just in a sky of stars. So
can you imagine being able to see stars that nobody else can see because there's too much, because there's too much light? Yeah. Wow. I've never heard of that. Although one thing I would like to do, it's totally unrelated to a national park, but I would love to go storm chasing, like tornado chasing. Yeah. Do you guys have tornadoes in California?
Very, very rarely.
Okay. See, we have tornadoes around here like once a week. So I'm like, but funny thing is, like I live sort of on the border of I'm in Arkansas, so I'm not quite in Tornado Valley, but pretty close to it. and I've never seen a tornado. And I've always wanted, it would be so fun to go on a storm chasing and like chase a tornado.
Yeah, you might want to do that once. It's kind of like it'd be fun to pet a bear, you know.
It would. Yeah. Are there any bears that you can pet, I wonder, anywhere in the world? So that would be, so, you know, let's do, I wanted to end up, I want to do just a quick couple of quick questions just to sort of give the readers or the listeners just a little bit something to get to know you. So what's your favorite book?
My favorite book might be To Kill a Mockingbird.
To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay.
Yeah.
Who is your auto-buy author? Every time they put about a book, you're going to buy it, even if you don't know a thing about it. Or do you even have one?
Well, okay, I would, but I say don't sound very exciting because I read a lot of nonfiction. So I would say Philip Yancey.
Who?
Philip Yancey. He's just
I've never heard.
Really brainy, brilliant author. He's written a book like What's So Amazing About Grace.
Yeah.
Really, really. I would definitely always read his books.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to check him out. You know, I'm always looking for a new author. I can't believe I've never heard of him. So, huh?
Have you heard of Lee Strobel?
Yes, like Lee Strobel. Okay. Yes.
He just came out with a new book that I just went ahead and bought hardcover, and I don't usually do that, but about the supernatural, which I think is kind of exciting.
Oh.
You might too.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, he's a newspaper investigative reporter.
Yes.
And that's how he became a Christian, because he was going to prove his wife wrong.
Yes, I've seen the movie based off his life.
Yes. So his books are really, really good. And I will say that Lee Strobel, I just went ahead and grabbed it.
Is he the one that wrote the supernatural book, or were you talking about Philip Yancey?
Yes.
Okay.
No, he just
Lee Strobel. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I'll definitely check that one out. I love books like that. So if you could sit down and have lunch with one person, living or not, who would it be?
I think Benjamin Franklin.
Oh, really? Why's that?
Yeah. He's just fascinating. I mean, in some ways, Elon Musk is our generation's Benjamin Franklin, for all that maybe people might feel about him, but just as far as that creative genius. And
he is, yeah.
Yes. So I'm not saying they're the same kind of persons, but just that Benjamin Franklin's mind, to me, is just amazing.
Yeah, especially for the time period he lived in, because they were very antiquated compared to us. So yeah, that's amazing. So in the writing journey, like as we said earlier, you kind of learn as you go. So this will be the last question. What is one thing that you've learned from the time that you wrote your first book until now? What's one thing that you've learned along the writing process that maybe that you didn't know at the beginning, but that you've learned up to this point? Can you think of anything that?
Well, it is a business. And I think kind of getting yourself a little bit prepared for a long run and being really humble and wise and paying attention to the market, all that. I think getting the business side of writing really well understood is probably one of the best, most important things. Going to writers' conferences is such a shortcut for this path.
Yes.
But it is a business, and that's probably my biggest thing, because I think probably people have this kind of pie in the sky idea of writing a book and, oh, it's going to be great and this, and it's so glamorous. And it's really a lot of time in front of a computer by yourself.
It is. It really is. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a lot of comments with like reviews, people who don't have any idea who you are, but they can rip a book apart. I mean, and
yes,
without even respecting the author's efforts, which I think is one thing I always try to do in a review or endorsement, is respect people.
Yes. Yeah. There's not a lot of that in the world. You know, have you ever heard of Mary Higgins Clark? The mystery author? Yeah. I met her several years ago at a book signing that was near my house. And so and at the time I had just published my very first book. And so I was kind of talking to her while she was signing my book. And I said, what is one thing that you as an author, like basically that last question I just asked you, I said, what's something that you've learned, you know, throughout the writing process? And she was like, you know, she said, one thing that I'm glad I started my writing career, because, you know, she started writing like, I think in the 70s. She said, I was so glad I started my writing career before readers had the opportunity to leave reviews. She said, readers can really massacre you and your books. And she said, back in my day when I first started, she said, your biggest concern about it was what the New York Times was going to say about you, or what the, places like that. She said, so I'm so thankful I started my career. She said, because now I'm to the point, I don't really care what people write in reviews, because it doesn't affect me any. I was like,
a new writer is vulnerable.
Yeah. And I always feel so bad, especially because I read a lot of lesser known authors, because I am one. And so, I always feel so bad when people, when they put out a new book and the very first review is 1 star. It's like, really? You couldn't have thought of something nice to say about the book? And I've always said a lot of, and I'm not trying to destroy readers here, because we love our readers and we need our readers. But I was like, as an avid reader myself, I always try, and again, it's because I am an author, so I know how it feels to get those horrible reviews. I always try to do the sandwich method when I review books, because even if I don't particularly care for a book, I can always find things about it that I enjoyed, and so I always try to do, okay, I really like this book, this part of the book, it wasn't really my favorite, but I very rarely leave a bad review. It's very rare for me to give anything below 4 stars, because I know how much they hurt. So, but yeah, I thought that was funny that she said that. She was like, I'm just so glad I started my career before readers could leave reviews. And for me, I have a hard time. That's one of my biggest hurdles as an author, is getting people to review my books. I have a hard time getting reviews on my books. So
I love that she said that. And it's so honest and so real to just remember she started once too,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. She was just like all the rest of us. I think lightning did strike pretty fast for her, but again, she started writing back in the day when self-publishing wasn't a thing. So if you couldn't get picked up by a publishing company, you weren't going to publish anything. So I think maybe in that aspect, it might have been a little bit easier to become a successful author. So, well, tell the readers where they can find you on social media.
I would really encourage people to go to my website, www.suzannewoodsfisher.com. And from there, you can send me an email, or you can sign up for my newsletter, or I try to really take good care of my subscribers, and they're always the first for a contest, for a giveaway, for news, for a cover, and that kind of thing. I'm also on Instagram a lot, and I should be on Facebook more, but I kind of forget about it sometimes, which is funny. I don't know. I didn't used to be that way, but Instagram's just so quick and easy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot less high maintenance. And I don't know about you. I'm not I do social media just because it's a good way to get your stuff out there. But I'm not a fan of social media. I'm one of the few people that can take it or leave it.
I know. I think a lot of people are becoming more discerning about it, because it is a time sucker. And
it is.
13, 14-year-olds, imagine how you'd feel with you're 13, 14, walking into the world of social media right now.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. So capture the moment. I think you may have to remind me. I think it comes out. Is it May 6th?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
Comes out on May 6th. Anywhere you purchase books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pretty much anywhere you can buy it. So if anybody wants to follow us on Bookish Introverts Podcast, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. We're just now started one on TikTok. TikTok's probably my least favorite one. I literally go on and post and get off. I'm not even interested in watching anything on TikTok, but we're there. We'd love to have you follow us, comment, reach out to us. We're at bookishintrovertspodcast@gmail.com. If you want to reach out to us. So you got any parting remarks before we let go?
Well, only that, depending on when this podcast airs, Baker Bookhouse is offering pre-orders of 40% off and free shipping. And Baker Bookhouse, which is part of Baker Publishing Group, is the largest Christian bookstore in the world. It is amazing. And they are doing a great job. They really are. So with the pre-orders, you get a lot of swag, which is fun too.
Yeah. I order a lot of my books from them because I love getting the little bookmarks, and the fun little stuff that you don't go if you walk into Barnes and Noble and buy it. So plus
but we love Barnes and Noble. We love Barnes and Noble.
Yes, we do love Barnes and Noble. Yeah. And sometimes it's easier just to walk in the door and buy it, or or just put it in your shopping cart online and buy it. So wherever you buy books, go on and snatch it up. Yes, absolutely. Yes. So, well, it has been a pleasure talking to you today. So, me too. Thanks for coming on. Mm-hmm. So, thank you all for listening, and tune in next time when we'll have another great author on. So, thank you, Suzanne. It was a pleasure. Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Bookish Introverts podcast, where together we explore the worlds within the pages. Until next time, stay bookish.